Hello, everybody, and welcome to Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, author of The Voices of Hockey, Broadcasters Reflect on the Fastest Game on Earth, a book that is available in audio format. You can find on Audible and Apple Books, so check it out. 65 NHL play-by-play broadcasters discussing the last 60-plus years of NHL history, their firsthand experiences, most memorable moments, craziest moments, talking about 35 NHL teams past and present, and including the Vegas Golden Knights and Seattle Kraken, two teams that were not included in the original edition that came out in 2016, nor the paperback edition that came out in 2017. 12 hours of this kind of material read to you by the silky smooth voice of Chuck Bowler. Enough of the plug. Now, I do come to you from the southwest corner of Washington State. I'm 2,454 miles from Little Caesars Arena. Now, we're in day 8 of our hiatus from the Red Wings, which means we're 2 weeks out from the team returning to action against the Ottawa Senators. We'll talk a little bit about the Senators in the rumor mill segment today, but first we got Olympic hockey men's edition. Started yesterday. Slovakia took on Finland and surprisingly beat them, and then Sweden beat Italy. Going back to Slovakia, Finland, it wasn't even like an overtime win or a shootout win. It was a straight up 4-1 beatdown. Slavkovsky had 2 goals and an assist, and then Ruzicka had his empty netter late in the game. The interesting thing about the Ruzicka goal was that it was assisted by Tomas Tatar. You remember Tatar, our dangler in the shootouts back in the days, the one we traded away to get a couple of solid draft picks. We traded him to Golden Knights in the Vegas's inaugural season, and they were looking to just really tune up to make that deep run, which they did in the Stanley Cup final, but they fell short of the Capitals. In the offseason, they trade Tatar, Nick Suzuki, and another couple of picks over to the Montreal Canadiens for Max Pacioretty. So here we are. Tatar's in 3 teams in less than a year. Poor guy. And I believe the journeyman status continued, and I believe he went over to New Jersey at some point, and I don't even know from there, and no longer in the NHL anymore. So it's sad to see that because he was solid. When I was in Vegas and I found out the Golden Knights picked him up from the Red Wings, considering the fact that the Red Wings were so far out of playoff contention at that time, that I was happy to see a Red Wing come over to the Golden Knights on that run that they did. But I am kind of saddened to see that Tatar is not factoring in. The other game that happened was Sweden versus Italy, and Italy actually scored the first goal. Sweden tied it back up, and then I believe they took the lead, but Italy tied it up again. So we're seeing this surprising resurgence or just life out of Italy. And Sweden kind of made quick work of that. Before the second period came to an end, they had scored to be up 3-2, and then they tacked on another 2 goals. Pretty much kept Italy at arm's length the whole third period. So Zibanejad scored, Landeskog scored, Forsling scored, Nylander scored, and Hedman scored. All NHL superstars, not superstars, I guess that'd be a little bit of a stretch to call somebody like Forsling a superstar, but Hedman has proven himself for the Lightning, and obviously, Zibanejad has been a very solid offensive player this year. I have him on my fantasy team. Landeskog, obviously solid contributor to that Colorado Avalanche team that won the Stanley Cup in 2022. So we got a lot of players here that, William Nylander, member of the four-headed monster in Toronto at one point. Well, it's no longer a four-headed monster, but more people recognize William Nylander for his middle finger, but at least he's representing his team, getting a goal now, and maybe they'll forget about that whole gesture. So the U.S. plays Latvia in a couple hours. We'll have some updates on that and the other action going on today in men's hockey as we continue to update on the Olympics. Returning to Red Wings action, it's Thursday, so that means it's Throwback Thursday. Now, I'm going to kind of take a different stance today. I'm not necessarily going to be sharing a win by the Red Wings. I'm going to be sharing a period of wins that came to an end. This is in 2012. Looks like it was February 23rd of 2012. Between November 5th, this is a game that started the Anaheim Ducks. This was the Red Wings beating the Anaheim Ducks November 5th. This started a string of 23 straight home wins for the Red Wings that would end at the hands of Vancouver on February 23rd of 2012. Now, during those 23 games winning at home, the Red Wings obviously were winning on the road too. They ended up in third in the division that year. They ended up losing in the opening round to the Nashville Predators, 4-1. But this was history. This was history this season. And it came to an end, surprisingly, in a shootout loss to the Canucks. Now, the reason I bring these things up is because the Red Wings, I felt, well, everybody felt, they had the Vancouver Canucks dead to rights. Basically, when the third period happened, the Wings were up 2-1, I believe. And then Vancouver scored to make it 2-2 to tie it. And then within 20 seconds, the Red Wings put it back up 3-2. So it seemed like they were pretty destined to break the record and win 24 games in a row at home. 16 seconds to go in regulation, 6-on-5 basically. And the Sedin sisters, yes, that's what I said, the Sedin sisters. That's a little term I learned from a friend of mine who is a Sharks fan, so obviously taking it out on them. But yeah, Henrik and Daniel Sedin connected for the second time in the game. 16 seconds to go, forces overtime. Nobody scores in overtime. Nobody does anything shootout-wise for the first 5 shooters. And then bottom of the third inning, looks like Alexandre Burrows takes down Jimmy Howard. There goes the streak. Could have been there at 24. Could have been creating a new, chapter in Red Wings history, a team that is now 100 years old. But it got stopped basically starting at the 16-second mark of the to go in the regulation. So it's just one of those things to look back on. The team was not obviously the team of 2008 that won the Cup, or the 2001 2002 team that won the Cup, but there were still players there that were effective. This was a team that was captained by Nicholas Lidstrom. Yzerman was long since retired. Fedorov was long since gone to whoever he was playing with at the time. And they were getting it done with players like Darren Helm, Heinrich Zetterberg, and my favorite, Pavel Datsyuk. Filippo Laosulu was scoring. And it's just to think that they were able to accomplish something like that in that team and not be, during the 62 win season of 95-96 or the 01-02 season. For this to happen in the 11-12 season after, the champagne's dried in the ice from the last Stanley Cup championship of 4 years earlier, it was impressive to see this win streak. And I will say this, in that 6-on-5, I noticed they tried to clear, but they cleared out into the middle, and that's when the puck was taken. Turnover, obviously, deep in their own zone, set up that goal. So that's one of hockey's biggest no-nos, is to clear and not away from, basically clear into the front of the ice and set it up for the goaltender to really be having to put in the work. And so that's exactly what happened. Lessons to learn. Obviously, when you're down 6-5, basically, you're just trying whatever you can do to push the puck into some kind of openness up the ice to avoid them continuing to attack, and they just didn't do it. Forced the turnover, ended up costing them history. But maybe one day they'll win 24 home games in a row with a whole new set of Red Wings players, and promising. Maybe this batch of Red Wings during the Yzer plan and the rebuild will get that 24 home game winning streak, but you never know. So we're just going to do a real quick segment on the rumor mill. Just one rumor that's really brought to everybody's attention over the internet was Jesper Wallstedt. Now, he's the backup goaltender to Minnesota, but he has played in, he's 14-5-4, so he may be a backup goaltender, but he's getting the starts in just as well as Gustafsson is. So he has played in almost as many games. The rumor is that he is going to be heading over to Ottawa. I don't know. That's just kind of the thing that has been slightly, they've tied those two teams together in this rumor. But Minnesota right now, they're standing at second in that Central, that highly competitive Central, and obviously Gustafsson's doing what he's doing. I don't like the idea of giving up a solid number two like that. Now, if it's somebody that was basically playing maybe half as many games as Wallstedt's been playing, maybe you can say, give me your best for it. He's obviously a solid. He could be a number one. He's not our number one, but see what you can get out of it. Ottawa, who knows if this is even going to happen, but Ottawa obviously has been retooling. They did that whole straight tear down after losing in double overtime in Game 7 in 2017 to the Penguins. Instead of basically continuing to build on that, they just decided to do a tear down. And they've obviously have come back from playoff irrelevancy. They went 7 seasons without going to the playoffs. So they finally made it back to the playoffs last year. Going into last season, the off season of 2 seasons ago, we lost David Perron to them. That was a sad one thing for me because I was following David Perron back in the Golden Knights days, and I was so happy that he went over to the Red Wings, and he was such a factor offensively. Obviously, they couldn't keep the pockets open or keep them deep enough to keep him, but Ottawa was looking to do, what they could, and they're still getting players to try to, they got Michael Amadio in the offseason from Vegas, and I know that Michael Amadio can be a difference maker. So they're trying to build that team up right now, and I can see this Wallstedt acquisition happening. I don't think it makes sense for Minnesota. You don't want to tire up Gustafsson too much when they're making the run that they are, but who knows? They may see a different thing than I'm seeing, and there might be a little bit more incentive to them to actually pull off a move like this and allow for Jesper Wallstedt to go over to Ottawa. Closing out the show today, we're just going to do a little bit of spotlight on Andrew Copp. Now, Andrew Copp really got hot. Obviously, he was the one who scored the game winner in Sergei's big night against the Carolina Hurricanes, and we've seen some solid playing out of him. We even saw him up there on the top line. But that's kind of changed right now, and we've had a little bit of a switch. And so on the power play unit especially, that's when we've seen the switch. Kane went back to the big boys to be with DeBrincat, and then the 3 Olympians, Kane, DeBrincat, and the Olympians. Let's write out a movie title. There it goes. But that's what's going on right now on the first line of the power play, and Copp's been relegated down to the second power play unit. But he obviously nothing's really changed as far as, the status of him, in regular playing conditions. He's still going to be the center with the DeBrincat and Kane. Just a couple of things about it, though, is he's only got 1 point in his last 5 games, and he's only got 3 points in his last 8 games. So the one thing I will say, though, like I said, he got demoted for the power play. They want Kane up there and that chemistry with Mo, Larks, Raymond, and DeBrincat and Seider. But, one thing that you can't take away from Copp is that he has basically been Lady Bing worthy this season. I don't think he'll get the Lady Bing, but he's only got 2 penalty minutes over his last 27 games played. He's got 16 total penalty minutes all season. That's fantastic. That is just great to think about that, especially the 2 penalty minutes over the last 27 games. I have said time and time again in each of the shows how disciplined the Red Wings have been staying out of the penalty box, how that's been a huge help to us, especially since we play such close games most of the time. And Copp is one of those big contributors to that by staying out of the penalty box himself and not making those stupid mistakes. So I like to tip my hat to him. You may not be scoring that much lately. Obviously, you're due. You're going to turn back around, I'm sure. You're the kind of player, you're the veteran that can do that. But as long as you're staying out of the penalty box like that and dishing the passes off to DeBrincat and Kane when the time is necessary, regulation time, not regulation time, non-special teams time. And then, you're obviously with the Rooks right now on the second power play unit, so you can dish them a little bit too. There's nothing to take away from that. Anyway, that's our show for today. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit about U.S. hockey tomorrow before the weekend starts. And for now, this has been Red Wings Daily. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, LGRW from the PNW.